bringing the people behind our food to life.
We're going to be making ricotta today. Now, a lot of people think that cheese making is difficult to do, and aging cheese is more difficult, but there are lots of fresh cheeses that you can make within 1 hour. Ricotta is one of them. It's very simple. All you need is some milk. Here I have some milk from a farm, but you can use milk from a grocery store as long as it is not ultra pasteurized. Plain pasteurized is just fine. The other things you need are some sort of acid, and in my case, I'm going to use citric acid. You can also use 1/8 of a cup of lemon juice or 1/8 of a cup of vinegar. I find that apple cider vinegar is a good flavor. Another thing you'll need is salt. Really, that's just to taste, so it's going to be completely up to you. And we have a little bit of water here so that we can dissolve the citric acid in so that it can distribute into the milk evenly. We have what is called butter muslin, and it is just a fine grade cheesecloth. You also need a cooking thermometer, and I just have some optional herbs here for taste. As far as equipment, I have a colander, a big pot here just acting as a sink that's going to catch my whey. I have a stainless steel pot here just big enough to hold my 1/2 gallon of milk, and a nice stirring spoon. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is just pour my milk into the pot. And then I need to dissolve the citric acid in a little bit of water. And as I said, that just helps us distribute the citric acid solution into the milk. So there's really not a specific measurement, just a little bit. And if you use the lemon juice or vinegar, you don't need the water at all. You just go straight in. Pour that all in. Make sure it all gets in there. And then we're going to turn on the heat. And we'll start at a pretty high medium and stir throughout to make sure that it's not scorching on the bottom. It takes quite a few minutes, so that's why I like to start it a little bit high to just see how far up I can push it and how quick I can make it. So that will just be heating up to about 185, and that does take a while. So I would just stir every once in a while and check with your thermometer. It's nowhere near that right now. So I had this at room temperature. It's a little bit lower than 70 degrees. We're waiting for 185, and that's going to take a little while. In the meantime, you just get your workstation ready. Put your nice cheesecloth over your colander. This cheesecloth is nice and fine. If you buy the stuff that you get at a grocery store, your curds are going to go right through the big holes. So if you can't find anything like this, a clean piece of cloth that you can find at home would be just fine. So you'll start to see some coagulation. You can actually already see it as soon as you put the acid into the milk and the milk starts to heat up. But we're going to look for a lot more than this. We're going to need it to be clumps of white curds floating in yellow whey. So it's not quite there yet. Right now everything's still really nice and white and milky. So what's going to make that happen for us is the heat. So now we just wait. So I think this is neat because you get to see that you're already making cheese, but you're not quite there because the milk is still very much white and you haven't been able to get all of the curds separated from the whey. But you're on your way. This is how you know it's working. I'm just checking the bottom again to make sure I'm not getting scorching. It's just messy to clean, and if it really gets burned, it can give your cheese a burned flavor. You'll taste that throughout. So far, so good. So we're looking for 185, and right now it's just approaching 160, so we just have a little bit more to go. As we get closer and closer to the temperature, you can see that the milk is turning more of a yellowish color, so that's the whey. If I move it here, you can tell there's a difference in color between the curds, which are these, and the whey, which is a more yellowish liquid in there. And remember when I told you that the cheesecloth has to be really fine? All of these tiny little curds have to be caught in order to make cheese, so you would lose these. That's why that's a really important thing. And it's doing great. I don't have any burning on the bottom, but I did have to watch the temperature a little bit as I went. So I just recommend keeping an eye on it And don't walk away. Milk can really boil over and can leave you a huge mess very, very quickly. I'm going to check the temperature one more time to see where we are. I suspect we're getting pretty close just by the steaming that I see, the little bit of frothing, and the amount of curds and whey that I can see clearly separated. So last time we were at about 160 and you saw what that looked like. Now that we're checking, it's definitely crossed past 160. And when you check your temperature, it's important to really stir the whole pot and take a reading from a couple different spots in the pot, because if you have an electric stove or a gas stove, heat can distribute kind of differently throughout the pot, and it also depends how thick the bottom of your pot is. So just kind of check it around different places. We're getting pretty close here. The signs you're looking for are the separation between the curds and whey. So you want to see clear white and clear yellow with the whey. That's the liquid, that's the yellow. Almost looks like Gatorade. And you want to make sure that when you lift up your spoon, you can see all of the curds there. And I can see all that, but now let's check our temperature. So we're at 170. I started hearing it make noise, and you want to make sure that you don't get the bubbling that you'll get when you start boiling. So that's what you want to really watch out for. So yes, it's not boiling, but it's at 180, and we want to get it at just 185. And really, once you start talking about 180 to 195, it's going to be about how firm you want your ricotta to be, because you can make cheesecakes with ricotta. You can fill pasta shells, put it in lasagna, crumble it onto chili. And the firmer it is, you know, the more options you have as far as toppings. The creamier it is, the easier it is to incorporate into cooking. So the lower the temperature, so I'm going to stop it at 185, the more of a spread it can be. So we're going to make almost like a dipping type of cream cheese with it, which is how you typically see ricotta. So yes, we're hovering at about 180. So I'm going to just pump up the heat a tiny bit, because all it needs is just that last little bit. I'm going to give this just a minute or two more, and then it's ready. So the next step is we're just going to turn off the heat, and we're going to let the curds cook in the hot whey about 10 minutes. And that's going to make sure that you get as much as you can out of this. So you want to get a nice ½ pound out of your ½ gallon. So I'm going to turn it off because I hear the noise that tells me it's quite hot. But let's check the thermometer just to make sure that we hit the temperature. So yeah, it's just a little bit higher than 180 there, and I'm happy with that because I want it to be nice and spreadable. So I'm going to stop it there, make sure my flame is off, and then let it sit for 10 minutes. So here we have our curds and whey nicely separated, and we're going to separate them further by pouring the whole thing into the cheesecloth that we prepared over the colander. Have that right over here. So you do want to be a little bit careful as you pour this. Some people ladle it in, but I'm a little bit impatient. So I like to just pour the whole thing in. So be gentle because it's hot, but also because any kind of agitation, just like with the mixing, breaks up your curds, and you work so hard to shape those. So you want to make sure that you don't break them all up. You can see some sticks to the bottom, but it's not burned. Don't worry so much if yours gets a little bit brown. As long as it's not burned, you don't have a problem. But I want to get as much as I can out of that. So there are a couple of ways to drain this. The very passive, easy way, especially if all you're going to do is use this in some dish like a cheesecake or lasagna, is you take your corners, you tie them up, and you hang the whole bag. So this is often what you see when people are making cheese, whether you see it in a gigantic facility. You can find videos where you see people making Parmesan in Italy, and they're giant vats, but this is the exact same process. So you would hang this, and people have all kinds of interesting ways of hanging this. You can just put it on a hook and hang it from your kitchen somewhere. Or you can put it on a spoon and rest it into a tall vessel. But I helped it along a lot by doing that, just that little bit of hanging. And you can see here I have nice ricotta already, but I do want it to be a little less wet. And salt really, really helps to draw moisture out. So not only do we want the moisture drawn out, but we want a really nice flavor. I'm not going to use this in any kind of cheesecake or anything. I do want to use it as a savory spread. So I'm going to add salt to it, and I would say that's about a teaspoon for the half gallon. And as you mix, you'll see that the curds are getting more and more dry. So somewhere between oatmeal, mashed potatoes is what you're looking for. Cottage cheese, a lot of people are familiar with cottage cheese. But that right there, that's ricotta. And so you're done. This will take less than an hour to get to this point. Most of the time you're waiting for milk to heat and for the curds and whey to drain. But here's your blank canvas now. What are you going to do with it? What do you have growing in the garden, in the windowsill? What's in season? So here I have some nice basil, oregano, and dill that I dried last summer. So I'm just going to sprinkle some of that in for a little bit of flavor. The longer this sits, the more the flavor is going to infuse throughout the cheese. But we want to taste it right away. So I want to just mix it up, get it nice and incorporated. It's almost like a really soft ice cream at this point. And as I said, it's ready, so you can eat it warm, or you can cool it and have it out later as a nice cold cream cheese. But I would call that one done, and I think it's a really neat treat. Pretty rare, right, to have warm cheese right after it's finished being made. But alternately, as I said, this is your blank canvas. You can shape it. So here I poured all of the curds from a previous batch. And so I have it shaping in a cheese mold. And if you let it sit in the refrigerator, drain a little bit further and get cold, like any cheese, it's going to get a little bit more firm. So I'm going to show you what this looks like shaped. So now you have a little wheel. And this one also has herbs and red pepper flakes and things like that. But you can play around with anise, with chocolate, with dried fruits, and make it sort of a desserty cheese type of thing. There you have it. Less than an hour, ricotta, your blank canvas. You can do a lot of things with it, and it really doesn't get much harder than this to jump into farmer's cheese, paneer, mozzarella. All of those cheeses are fresh. You don't need to age them. You can eat them within an hour. So I hope you enjoy it.
You got more heating up in the other kettle?
Yeah.
The purpose of what we do is just to have the kind of food we like, because either you can't find it or you have to pay a whole lot of money for what some people call artisan food. I just call it good farmhouse food.